Thank you for coming today, even though most of you had no choice because your parents made you come. But thank you for being here and coming up to join us in the student area. We're in week 2 of a new series called My New Playlist. Or Your New Playlist, I guess, is what it's called. So I should probably get that part right. But Your New Playlist, the new way to start thinking when you have negative thoughts that just constantly play on repeat. How many of you, your parents have like a record player, or you've seen your grandparents that have a record player? You ever like played one of these before? Like, it's so cool. It's like the original iPod, except it's not tiny. And now we don't have iPods either. But you put the little record on it, right? And it spins around, and you put the little needle, and then it starts magically playing music, right? It's kind of wild if you think about it. It's pretty cool technology. And then, of course, you know, we got more advanced and got to the point where we are today. But back then, you had to be very delicate and careful with these records, because if you got even the slightest little like scratch on it, what would happen? Back before DJing was cool and it would actually do it on accident, and then it would like repeat the same part over and 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 over again, and then you'd be like, you'd drive you nuts. Like, any of you seen the Polar Express? We just finished Christmas season. There's a part near the end of the movie where they're at the North Pole and they're like wandering through, and there's a record scratch that happens, and there's a Christmas song that plays the same line on repeat for like a minute, and it drives me nuts every time I'm watching that movie. So look out for that. It's like jingling, 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 and it goes over and over and over again. You'll never unhear it once you hear it. But that's the reality, is when you have negative thought in your mind that you can't get out, it's like that record scratch that just repeats in your mind over and over again. So how do you clean it up? How do you get rid of that? How do you maybe even swap the record so that you stop hearing the same thing over and over and over again? Because even the smallest flaw or imperfection in a record can throw the whole thing off of what it's supposed to be. All right, I remember when I was in 7th grade. How many 7th graders we got in here? Okay, good. Got a handful of you guys. I was your age. When I went through something that all boys go through, which is my voice dropped. And it was an exciting time, because suddenly, roll call in the morning, and the teacher would ask, Zach, I'd be like, here, and it was low. And I remember one time my teacher was like, whoa, your voice dropped. And it seemed to happen overnight. And I was like, yeah, it did, right? I'm a real man now. And then like trying to get through the squeaks, I'm a real man now. And, anyway, I'm like in my 30s now. I don't feel like a real man still, but that's okay. I think it's just a mindset thing, and I don't have that sometimes. But I remember when that happened, like growing up in church, I used to sing in like kids choir, and like I would have solos, or my parents, my mom would lead worship for different things, so I would like sing. But 7th grade, when that voice dropped, something weird happened, and I could no longer maintain a pitch. I couldn't, to save my life. And suddenly, every song that I used to sing was too high. So I would be singing in church, and I couldn't find the pitch. I couldn't sing as high as I was supposed to. And all my friends next to me, they could all sing, and they had no problem. They went through puberty like it was nothing. They were still in choir. I was a band kid. So like I didn't have vocal lessons or anything. And I was like, I was super self-conscious. In fact, my dreams of being like a rock star kind of diminished my 7th grade year and even into my 8th grade year. And I was like, well, I guess I'm never going to really sing again, because I don't know how to actually sing anymore. Suddenly, anybody that could keep a pitch was a really good singer to me, because I know how hard that is, right? And so I remember struggling with that a lot. And I remember almost like my identity had to shift, because I was like, I guess I'm no longer the guy that can sing, right? And when people get to know you for something, and then like suddenly, if you've ever lost the ability to do what people know you for being the guy that does, like it's really weird. And I remember that discomforting feeling that I had, the negative thoughts that went through my head all the time. Every time I was at church and had to sing, or anytime that I was around my friends, and we'd all, even if we'd just be in the car and be turning up the song on the radio, and I had this thought on my head on repeat that would just tell me like, you're never going to sing again. And it was devastating for me for the longest time, right? And I bet even if it's not with that particular issue, a lot of you guys can relate because there's things in your life that maybe you always get this sense and this feeling and these words in your head that tell you you're not enough, right? You're not going to be able to live up to the standard. You're not enough to be able to do X, Y, or Z. You're not enough to be able to hang out with those people. And that was a phrase that I felt I had in my head a lot. Maybe that's what the broken record in your head sounds like as well at times. It's that you're just not enough. Right? You're not going to be popular enough or smart enough or trendy enough or good looking enough or funny enough or just fun enough or talented enough or fill in the blank enough to be able to do what it is you want to do or to be the person that you want to be. And it's an extremely disheartening feeling. And honestly, I can understand why people struggle, right? I can understand because a lot of our worth is attached to things about ourselves that actually our worth should not be attached to us. It's attached to the things that we feel like we can accomplish or the person that we are, our reputation, the person that we are in the minds of those around us. And that, if we're honest, defines way more of us than it should. And so, what do you do with that record when it scratches in your brain over and over again telling you you're not enough? Right? The problem is we buy into the lie that there's a finish line somewhere along the way, that at some point we'll be enough, right? At some point, if I become popular, I'll be popular enough and I won't get left out, right? I'll never get left out again. But the reality is that's just not true. If I'm smart enough, maybe I'll never feel dumb or stressed out about my grades again. If I'm trendy enough, then I'll fit in, right? We tell ourselves that there is somewhere along the way a finish line, that if we can be enough and somewhere cross that blurry line into the enough land, then suddenly all our problems will go away. But that's just not how life works. Even if you are popular, there's always going to be somebody else more popular, right? Even if you become really smart, one bad grade can throw off your whole confidence and your jive and your confidence about yourself, really. Even if you've got the newest shoes and they're totally on brand, guess what? There's always a new pair of shoes that are going to be coming out next year, or maybe even later this year, right? My point is, enough is never enough. If enough is where you wish to be. If your whole goal is to be enough, then for whatever your standard of enough is, once you get there, a new standard will be shown to you. And you'll always be wanting more if that's what you make your life about. And if we're not careful, we'll accidentally make our lives about the things that we think will eventually make us enough. It's this rat race that will never end. And so no matter what we do or how hard we try, we're just never going to get to the point where we're going to have this confidence that we believed we would have. And so how do we change the playlist when we never feel like we're enough? That's really the question that we're going to be answering today. So here's what I want you to think about, all right? I want you to think about birds. Birds. Like tweet, tweet, birds, right? Bet you weren't expecting me to say that, right? Think about the birds, okay? How many of you wake up in the morning to birds? Maybe not in the winter because it's cold and they all went south. But in general, especially when it's light out when you wake up and it's not gloomy and dark all the time, especially when it's summer or spring, you hear the birds tweeting outside, right? You hear them bickering. We think, oh, it's cute, the birds are tweeting, but really they're just fighting over a nut or something. Like birds tweeting in the air. Think about that and just imagine with me right now. Look into your minds and see birds. Whenever you feel like you're not enough, just think about the birds. Right? Sounds weird? I'll make it make sense, okay? When you have that broken record in your head, maybe that feels like those negative thoughts that just keep pounding you over and over again. Just think about birds. In fact, that's not just my idea. That's actually Jesus' idea, to think about the birds. In fact, check this out. In Matthew chapter 10, this is what he says, right? He says, what's the price of a pet canary, right? Some loose change, right? Some translations say a sparrow, a couple pennies, right? And God cares what happens to it even more than you do. He pays even greater attention to you, down to the last detail, even numbering the hairs on your head. So, don't be intimidated by all this bully talk. You're worth more than 1,000,000 canaries. Right? So, think about it. And he says a similar thing in Matthew chapter 6. Like the birds, like they don't have to, wonder where their food's going to come from. God provides. Right? He built the world in such a way that they'd be sustained. Right? How insignificant are birds? Like here, they're worth pennies, some loose change. Right? Yet, they have their needs and God sees to it that they're taken care of. If even birds are taken care of, then every time you hear the tweet, every time you hear that, think about birds, just remember, for how much those birds are taken care of, you are taken care of infinitely more than that. Why is the question, though? Why do you matter more than the birds? You are made in God's image. You are image bearers. We have been given a responsibility to subdue the earth, to rule over everything in the earth as God's image bearers. And not only that, but to then be the hands and feet of God the Creator to those around us. Right? So not only are we here made in God's image, but we're here with a purpose, with God's purpose in mind. And if there's a purpose that God has for your life, then don't you see that He will take care of you He will see to it that all your needs are met in order to fulfill the purpose that He's given you? My point is this. When we feel like we're not enough, two things have to happen. One, you have to recognize that there's always going to be things in life where there's going to be people better than you. There's always going to be seasons of your life where you are making mistakes, where you are failing, where you are sinning against your Creator. But you don't have to prove anything to God. There's always going to be a sense in which you really aren't enough. But that doesn't have to be the negative thing that's on repeat in your mind, because at the same time, just like those pennies, there's one side that is the reality, you're not enough. And then there's the other side that says that's okay because God makes you enough. And it's not by anything that you can do. It's by nature of who you are, that you are enough. This whole series, we're talking about this idea of you got to have a new playlist in your mind. Whenever you start to hear lies, you need to replace those with truth, with God's promises. And so one of the things we've done is provide a playlist for you. And one of the songs that was on my playlist growing up was a song by 10th Avenue North. And how many of you guys, do you know who 10th Avenue North is? They kind of retired a few years ago. But they have a lot of huge songs that if you heard them, you'd probably recognize them. Okay? The song I'm going to show you today is the title track to one of their albums like 12 years ago. And it's not one of their biggest songs, but it's one of my favorite songs. And he talks about this idea a lot. And so I'm going to show you a clip of him talking about this song, and then I'm going to let you hear part of the song in an acoustic set. And we won't listen to the whole thing, but I want you to get the idea of the point I'm trying to make here. So check out these couple video clips. To that song later and hear the rest of it. It's one of my favorite songs because of that truth. It's this tension that we hold between our feelings of inadequacy mixed in with the truth that, you know what? You are enough as you are. Right? God loves us so much that He accepts us as we are. And His love changes us. Right? We don't live for God's love. We live from God's love. We don't live for His affirmation. We live from it. He's affirmed us as we are. When we give our lives to Him, then our lives start to change in ways that we can't do on our own because, honestly, we'll never be enough on our own. And that's the amazing truth of the gospel. Because of Jesus, you are enough. And so remembering that can help you stop the broken record in your mind that says you'll never be enough. right? You can stop trying to be enough. You can stop believing what isn't true about you, because if there's anything that we learn from the gospel, if there's anything that we learn from Jesus, if we learn anything from the resurrection, it's the fact that there's always somewhere that God is taking us. And when he has called us to something, he will carry us through to completion, which means that even when we're not enough, we are enough. It's this balance and this tension. We don't have to carry the anxieties and the fear and the shame of not being enough, because he is enough on our behalf. And his enough makes us enough. And so what I'm trying to say is your identity is not labeled. Your not enoughness is not who you are. Who you are as a child of the King is what makes you enough. To the point where there's freedom, and we don't have to stress or worry about our own inadequacies. Right? So if there's two ways that I think would help in this area, it's one, notice when the record's broken. Notice when the thoughts in your head, the scratches, the negative things that you hear in your mind are repeating, telling you you're not enough, you'll never be enough, you're not worth anything. You get those thoughts out of there, right? Because Jesus didn't come and die for you so that you could just not be enough, right? His sacrifice is what makes you enough. So notice when the record is broken and you're not hearing that truth. You're not remembering the promise that God's given you. And secondly, replace that broken record with a new one. You have to remember God's truths, God's promises. And if you need help remembering, I've curated a playlist just for you called Your New Playlist on Spotify. And you can scan that QR code and you can like it, you can follow it, and just put that on shuffle, listen to it on repeat. I've got lots of good tracks. The one that I just showed you, the actual song, not the acoustic one, is in this playlist. And as well as many others, you could listen to it for hours and just be filled with the positive truths of God's love, his promises for you and for your life, to remember that it's going to be all right. It's going to be all right. Some of you just need to hear the simple truth that it's going to be all right. You're going through difficult things. You're going through stressful situations. You're worried about a lot of things. Just trust me. Take a deep breath. It's going to be all right. And I hope that this playlist helps you feel that as you're listening to it. My feelings of inadequacy about my singing when I was in 7th grade and 8th grade, those didn't go away overnight. In fact, they still haven't gone away to some extent. But you know what? That's okay. And in fact, it was when I released my identity as being attached to my ability that suddenly it mattered less. I replaced my desire to be a singer with other things. God gave me new passions and new talents, new desires for things that I probably wouldn't have had I been focused on what I didn't have. Right? So just remember those truths. I love the way that the psalmist says this in Psalm 139. He says, I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are beautiful. I know that full well. In other words, God, I know that I am made by you, and if your works are beautiful, then what's that say about me? God doesn't make things that are ugly. God doesn't make unbeautiful things. He makes beautiful things. And if his works are wonderful, and I'm one of those works, that's what you need to know about yourself. You are enough. So as you guys go to your groups and digest this together, what's one way that you can remember that God says you are enough?